And yeah, let's start. This is our agenda for today. So we'll go through a quick objective section and an introduction to CISSP, followed by a list of topics that we are going to cover, and then of course deep dive into the topics. And also we will have a quick peek at Ingram Micro's cybersecurity services portfolio as a whole. And also, please be interactive. Please unmute yourself. If you're not able to hear me, please do unmute yourself and let me know that you're not able to hear me. And let's make the session engaging. So be interactive. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and jump in and ask me questions. Thank you for that. So to set the expectations clear, this is more of an overview session for the security operations domain of CISSP. This session is not a full-fledged training for the exam. So due to the limited time we have this will be more of like an overview to the topic in itself. And we do have a separate training which is available. It's a complete 5-day training as part of CISSP portfolio, our training portfolio, which will cover CISSP. All right. Introduction to CISSP. So just so everybody knows, CISSP is considered as a master's degree in some part of the world, especially in the UK. They recently announced it. They are considering it equal to that of a master's degree. And it is a 3-hour exam. It is on a CAT basis. So basically you will have 100 to 150 questions. And 700 is the pass grade. So, and sometimes people pass in 100 questions, and sometimes they take it even a little more further. And to also let you know about the certification itself, it's a vendor neutral certification. It validates information security professionals' deep knowledge into technical and managerial skills, and also their experience to effectively design, engineer, and manage the overall security posture of an organization. So it is not limited to network security or database security. It will look at all aspects of security. This is the exam weightage. CISSP has a total of 8 domains. And these are the different weightage assigned to the different domain. And you can see that the topic which we are going to cover, which is security operations, has 13% in terms of weightage. Clearly, it means that one of the important sections of the entire, when considering the entire 8 domains, and it is important to to also improve the overall security posture of an organization. Certification requirements. These are the requirements for the certification in itself, wherein you need to have 5 years of work experience and in at least 2 of the domains, or a 4 year of experience with a college degree. Who do not meet the above requirements can still write the exam, pass the exam. You don't get certified as CISSP, but you can become an ISC squared associate of ISC squared. And you'll be given 6 years time to gather the required experience, and then you can apply for your certification and you'll be a certified CISSP. And after certification, there is also a CPE requirements. That is one other thing I like about CISSP. And many more certifications, many more security certifications these days are also looking at that aspect as well. So CPE, continuous professional credits, basically. So educational credits. So what it means is you need to keep up with your status. So you need to gather for every year, it's around 40 CPs you need to gather. And you can take different options. If you attend a 1 hour webinar or a session, you get, there are certain options available, and you get 1 point each. And the best thing about CISSP is, out of this 40, 30 is associated with technical, and 10 is associated with the non-technical side of things. So let's say, for instance, you learned cooking or you learned a language, you can collect the 10 CP credits as part of that. So that's some of the things which you need to look at. So you need 40 CPs per year. So these are the list of topics which we are going to cover. So we'll start with some security operations concept, followed by physical security, personnel security, logging and monitoring, the importance it plays when it comes to security operations, patch and vulnerability management, why this is needed as part of our security operations, change management. We will also talk briefly about incident response, because that is one of the key things when it comes to security operations, investigation, and of course, disaster recovery, how we can recover from a disaster. Security operation concepts. Okay. What is security operations? These are the practices which we apply to protect information assets that resides within an organization. And these are, again, the set of practices or process and procedures that we use to identify threats and vulnerabilities for an organization. And we can, once we identify the threats and vulnerabilities, we can mitigate them by implementing controls and to improve the overall security posture of an organization, thereby reducing the overall risk to an organization asset. And the last part is, this is achieved by implementing common security operation concepts, along with performing periodic audits and reviews, because periodic audits are very important to know whether we are still maintaining it. After it or during the initial stages, it will be robust, and by time we would have changed certain settings, and that we would have missed to roll back. So those are the things we can find, any gaps we can find in periodic audits and reviews. And this will ideally demonstrate the level of due care and due diligence, which will again reduce the liability of senior managements when a loss occurs. So if you do not perform due diligence and due care, that is necessary care that should be taken, the liability increases. And when a breach occurs, if you can showcase the controls you have in place, you can reduce the negative effects of a breach. Because you cannot be 100% secure. Even with the best of controls, there will always be a way, but you should at least showcase that you have at least the minimum controls that are required to safeguard the organization's asset. Okay, we'll talk about need to know. So, okay, and it also brings me to the next topic. So, principle of least privilege. So anybody here would like to talk about the difference between need to know and the principle of least privilege? It's an open question. Anybody can jump in. Would you like to speak about need to know versus principle of least privilege? There is a subtle difference between them. You can even type it in the chat if you'd like. Okay, so no problem. Let me speak about it. So need to know. So what is need to know? Need to know is you okay, let's say for instance, you are a database administrator. And from a principle of least privilege, you need to have access to the database to maintain the database, but not the contents of the database. That is what need to know. And there will be times wherein you are an employee and you have a need to know, valid need to know for information, but your need to know is limited only during the working hours. So beyond the working hours, you should not have access to that particular data. So that is what need to know principle is. Principle of least privilege talks about, sorry about the background noise, there is a construction happening next door. Principle of least privilege talks about principle of least privilege is going to talk about you get the right privilege to access that data. So let's say, for instance, you are authorized to access the data you get the least privilege only to access the data or see the data. Need to know talks about when you can see the data. So that is the major difference between principle of least privilege and need to know. Yeah. So let's go through the slide. So the need to know principle imposes the requirement to grant users access only to data or resources they need to perform. They need to perform the assigned work tasks. And also it also satisfies the when you are allowed to access as well. So when you say a person is, so the second statement says, need to know is commonly associated with security clearances, such as a person having a security clearance to see a data. But having a clearance doesn't mean that they get access to the data indefinitely. No, you have a clearance to access the data, but it will only be applied when you are authorized or when you are supposed to see the data to do a particular job. That is what need to know is all about. And principle of least privilege is going to talk about what is the type of access which will be applied for you during the time when you need to perform the job. So you be a regular user will not be provided admin privileges. So you being a database administrator doesn't mean that you will get the privilege to view the data inside a database. So these are some of the things what principle of least privilege will cover. Basically, what it is going to do is give user exactly what they need to do a set job. And you cannot have permanent permissions. If the permission level should change, you need to do recertification periodically to know whether the authorization or the permissions are still valid. Basically, when it comes to an account for an IT personnel, you need to assign 2 accounts. Usually IT personnel or in most cases are admins, but they don't need admins for certain activities. So they will have 2 accounts, one for like a common end user account. The other one will be an administrative account. Administrative accounts will only be used when they need to perform administrative tasks. Other than that, they will be using their common end user accounts. And usually speaking, these administrative accounts will be tied behind a privilege access management solution so that it takes care of the access and resets a password to keep it secure, basically, because these accounts will have high privileges. Separation of duties. This is another important concept. This is what a maker and checker does. So one person is not authorized to complete an entire cycle. That is what it does, or it means. Because one person can enter a data, but let's say, for instance, if he wants to go and delete the data, he will not be allowed. So implementing separation of duties is the key so that you limit the power of an individual user to perform a whole activity, because this will result in collusion. So you develop a software, you test a software, but you have to go through a certain permissions to deploy the software. A development team will not be same as production team. So this is what a separation of duty talks about in particular. So in this case, a backup team will be different, a restore team will be different. So that a backup team not automatically restores the data, which they are not supposed to. So data entry person will be different, and the person who is authorized to delete some information will be different, usually a higher level. So creating policies can be one person, and enforcing the set policy will require a checker so that they enforce the correct policies on premises. So these are some of the examples. And a backup operator. An auditor will not be same as an IT administrator. An auditor will be an individual who has no relevance to the IT administrator or his daily roles and responsibilities. He will come and audit from a third-party perspective. So the next topic is job rotation and mandatory vacations. So to ask a question here, how do you think a mandatory vacation policy is going to enable security in an organization? Any thoughts are much appreciated. Do you think mandatory vacation policy is a requirement? to enable security. Am I being audible? Hello? Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Abdul. Yes. Job rotation and mandatory vacation, you can say it in this way. They go hand in hand. What would happen is, um, you are a firewall administrator and I am a network administrator. I don't deal with firewalls, but you deal with firewalls, and I only deal with network as a role. When I take a role as part of job rotation, you come and do my work and I come and do your work. What would happen is, we will try to understand what are the differences, what are the things which are being done, and at the same time, it will also create a deterrent measure wherein it works like more of a review aspect. Wherein if one person finds out there is a mistake, then it will be a problem for the other. So they try not to do mistakes. It's more like a peer review concept. So that is what they do. So job rotation and mandatory vacation. So when you are able to do a job rotation, so you can also become a backup. So when you can allow somebody to go on a mandatory vacation and you can do his job. And from a security perspective, this will enable you to avoid abuse of privileges by rotating people from position to position. And it will also help people to avoid doing it. It will become a deterrent control, and will ensure that people do not do any malicious activity, because there is always going to be another person who will be able to know what is going to happen, what happened in the past. So this is the benefit of job rotation and mandatory vacations. So these are the three primary phases of information lifecycle. And security operation is going to cover the entire information lifecycle. So creation, data owner, data custodian, they take care of the data creation, and they will also define and implement access control as to who has to have access to the data, who can see, who is authorized to edit, and who is authorized to publish. And also they will also assist to classify the data. Now, since they are the data owners, they will allow people to use. The second phase of a data information lifecycle is you create the data, and if you're not going to use it, there is no point in creating the data. So use of the data. Based on the classification, based on the authorization of the data owners, there will be users who will be using the data. And after said period of data validation or validity period, what will happen is the next stage will come in destruction of the data. You should not retain data beyond the said retention policy of that particular data. If the data is no longer valid, it is better to destruct the data in a secure. And data destruction, when it comes to electronic data, you should you should implement principles like degaussing, so that the data is deleted in a proper way. And for hard copies or paper-based data, you need to ensure you use proper shredders to delete that content, so that the content is not disclosed even after destruction. So these are some of the data security techniques across information lifecycle. Marking or classifying. This ensures that personnel can easily recognize the security that has to be applied to that particular data. Handling securely. The second concept is handling the data refers to how you transport the data or how you store the data. So that is the next concept. Yeah? So when you transfer the data, you need to transfer it securely. If in a digital place, you will be using HTTPS, for example, to transfer data securely. And of course, with TLS 1.2 and good security ciphers. And storing the data securely is another key factor. So there are when we talk about storing securely, the main thing we think of is encryption, but it also matters where encryption is applied. So let's say, for instance, if you use transparent data encryption at database level, it means that you are going to allow a database administrator to see the data. So if the data is very sensitive, and if you consider even a database administrator should not see the data, then the encryption for that said data should be done at application level. So that is what storing securely means. And destroying securely, as I said earlier, purging the data, clearing, degaussing. A simple delete will not delete the data. So by just deleting a data file on a computer drive, what actually happens is it only removes the pointer. You can still recover that data. So it is very important to destroy data securely, and there are multiple different methods that are available, and especially in the digital space. Yeah. So these are some of the guidelines for applying the concepts. Maintain operational resilience, protect valuable assets, control the system accounts, because these are high privileged accounts. You need to control who has access to them, and also manage security services effectively. You need to recertify when you authorize somebody. You need to recertify. You need to have a periodic approach rather than a one-time approach, and it is never one size fit all. We need to adopt, customize as per the requirements. Always least privilege, because nobody requires more privilege than what they need to do their everyday to-day job. So an administrator account is not required on a laptop, for example, to do visit websites, to open files. An administrator account is not really needed. An administrator account is needed only when we are trying to install softwares. So for a one-time activity, if you're going to permanently grant administrator accounts, what would happen is, when I believe, for some reason, for unintentional reason, a person visits a malicious website and he clicks on a link. What will happen is there is something called drive-by downloads. You just need to visit the link of the page and the malware can be downloaded automatically. So this is called drive-by download. So, and the malware will get executed at a higher privilege if you have administrator access. If you do not have administrator access, you'll get a UAC pop-up or something saying that, okay, something which requires additional permission levels is trying to execute, and thereby you are still protected. So principle of least privilege will also help you from an intentional risk, as well as an unintentional risk. As I said earlier, recertification. Let's say, for instance, you are going to assign a privilege for a person for 1 day. You need to ensure that it's removed after 1 day. So, but sometimes what would happen is, over time we try to assign privileges, but we forgot to remove those set privileges. And sometimes the person moves from one department to another, and we forgot to remove the privileges for that particular person. So what a recertification is going to do is periodic recertification. You're going to go back and check whether the permissions assigned to particular users are still valid. If not, you're going to remove them. And also, separation of duties is very important when it comes to key operations, including data backups, policy enforcement, software development, authorizing a transaction, etc. A maker should not be a checker. So there should be a maker, there should be a checker as well. Basically, you will be following 4 I's principle. So, as I said earlier, job rotation and mandatory vacations is going to be a fraud deterrent approaches. This will deter people or discourage people from doing an activity which he is not allowed to do. So all stages of data lifecycle should be protected. So from creation, use, and destruction. So you need to definitely incorporate security controls at all the stages. For example, one more time, during creation, you can enable classification, authorization, and during use, you can ensure it is used in a proper way, and stored in a proper way, transmitted in a proper way. And during destruction, you can ensure you follow secure destruction methodologies which are available to destroy the said data. So ensure that service level agreements are maintained and or as per the expectations with regards to your day-to-day operations. For instance, your backup and backup technologies or the backup methodologies which you use should be in such a way that it satisfies the RT1 RPO requirements for your business, and track your key metrics to support the requirements outlined in SLS, so that you can sustain your business in the long term. So these are some of the security operation guidelines concepts. The next topic of discussion is going to be physical security. So what is physical security? So we have all the information technology controls, but if somebody enters a data center, burns the data center, everything is gone. So that is what physical security is going to help us with. You will have defense in depth approach even in physical security. You should have layered protection, as in you will have a perimeter protection, you will have a facility protection and a secure area. For wherein, think of this as a data center, wherein you will have an outer layer, wherein you will have fences, gates, lights, cameras, dogs and guards, for example. And inside the, once you enter the primary gate, there will be a secondary one, wherein you will have locks, access controls, man traps, which will prevent people from, multiple people from entering, gates and other design measures that will be in place for facility protection. And then for secure area, another access control mechanism should be in place with anti-passback. For example, a person who entered should only be allowed to leave, and you should have other tamper protection, open jars for your cabinets or racks where your servers will be hosted. And these are some of the guidelines for implementing physical security. You need to implement protection in layers, both at perimeter level as well as internal level. And physical access barriers like fences will keep your intruders outside your building perimeter as a whole. And you need to choose an appropriate lock type for physical assets as per the requirements. Some requirement would suggest, for instance, if you have a HSM, which handles your secure keys, you need to have two-factor authentications even for physical locks, like a biometric and a card, for example. So you need to implement physical access controls like man traps, so that only one person is allowed to enter. Nobody piggybacks others. That's basically what it does. And always lock up all your valuables, sensitive hard copy of the documents, physical money in storage like containers or safe. So use file lockers with proper, use secured file lockers basically for all your contents, any physical contents. And you should have guards for all critical areas. And you will definitely have perimeter and internal security, but even after coming inside an office building, if you have a data center, you should have an additional guard over there. If you have a perimeter intrusion detection system, it will also monitor if somebody climbs on your wall and such. And you can also implement an integrated surveillance system. What will happen is it'll work along with the PIDS system. So whenever somebody a PID system detects a perimeter intrusion, camera will focus on that location and it will start recording that set time. Use different types of alarms so that security personnel are alerted to potential attacks. And ensure all physical access attempts. Whenever somebody enters a secure place, it should be logged. So ensure you have mechanism to log it. Sometimes if you do not have proper access control logging, you should at least have a notebook to log said attempts. The next one we are going to talk about is personnel security. Why personnel security is important? It is as simple as people, right? People are one of the most important assets for an organization. Without people, all other systems are valueless. Personal safety is one of the primary goals of physical security. Employees from physical, and at the same time to maintain their mental well-being is also an important thing. So that is what you do when it comes to exercises such as fire alarms and other things which we do from periodically. It is to protect a personnel or the employee of an organization, and it is one of the very important asset of an organization. And it is not only to protect the individual's physical life, but also to protect the personal privacy. So I believe every individual will have an expectation of privacy. Legal departments should provide guidance on what is legal and acceptable within an organization. It should not be too intrusive, just because you're working there. When somebody is working in a company, for critical areas, you can have multiple cameras, but not in a regular working area. And also set expectations among employees. And also ensure you sign an agreements as to the level of expected privacy, because you need to tell them this is what is happening, and you need to ensure they are aware of what is being monitored, and they also sign that particular document. It is a very important document to protect organization's interest as well, and to maintain a level of transparency that employees are comfortable with. Travel. When it comes to the travel part of it, try not to take sensitive information with you. If you can use a common source like if your organization has a managed for secure file transfer or something, use that approach rather than carrying it on your laptop. If you lose your laptop or a USB drive, it is going to be a problem. But if you still have to carry, ensure you're going to carry it on an encrypted device, and you have all the protection mechanisms that are in place, which we discussed earlier. Back up your data before you go. Do not only think that everything on your laptop is going to be safe. Even if it is deleted or if your laptop is destroyed, that is not going to be safe. So ensure you back up your data. If possible, use a different mobile phone when you go outside your environment. As I said earlier, use encryption where possible. And whenever you are traveling, have no expectation of privacy. When you're going to take a laptop and connect to a hotspot in an airport, for instance, think that a man in the middle attack is possible. Or let's say, for instance, you are going to work on something in a public location, others can see it. So see, if possible, use privacy filters where possible, so that people cannot see your screen. And also be careful of what you speak over the phone. If it is sensitive information, if it is heard by other party, it is going to affect your organization's interest. Beware of technical bias. So if you get a USB drive as a gift from an unknown person, or please be safe, because a USB drive can easily it can be an infected drive, or it can also be a kill switch, wherein as soon as you connect your laptop, it will destroy your laptop. And do not assume that only high-ranking executives in an organization will be targeted. For a malicious attacker, even a low-value asset is more than enough to get into your organization's network. So if he's able to target your laptop, and if he affects, you will in turn connect the laptop to your company's network, and that will affect the company as a whole. And always on return from a travel, if possible, change your password. And also ask your security team to examine your laptop or your phone, just to be safe, to know whether you have connected to any rogue networks, and they can also scan your laptops. So guidelines for ensuring personal security. Ensure all personnel understand the level of privacy with regards to the activities at work. If you are going to monitor their internet usage, you need to inform them. Write policies to establish privacy baselines and involve legal counsel if as and when necessary. And always post acceptable usage notices, permanent notices to specify what equipments or areas are monitored. Train users on best practices for maintaining privacy. So they should know how to maintain privacy, the ones which we spoke of in the last section. Always prepare your devices. So as I said, if you're going to travel with a device, ensure you make a backup, encrypt your device, harden the security, so that everything is in place and you will not lose any data. And always use careful judgment. Just because you found a USB drive, or if someone is asking you to connect a USB drive just to take it on an urgent basis, please do not use, because these may be infected or this can be a kill switch. And try to avoid the use of public Wi-Fi networks. And if you have to use public Wi-Fi networks, be aware of man-in-the-middle attacks. Try to use VPN where it is possible whenever you're connecting to official environments. And also ensure you are going to connect to the correct website. Ensure the secure lock is there when you visit banking websites or anything as such, wherein your credentials will not be compromised that way. So, and also ensure what a potential attack situation might cause your personal duress, as in what will happen to you, how can you escape out of that particular situation. Think of it that way. And a company, as an organization, they should also identify ways. For instance, if somebody is being targeted, they need to find a way to easily signal people that they are affected, they are in a problematic situation. So that way you can find ways to resolve or mitigate duress if an attack rises. Always seek out law enforcement. Do not take it in your hands. Try to seek out a law enforcement to deal with dangerous situations. These are some of the guidelines to ensure personal security. Logging and monitoring, another key aspects of security operation. Logging and monitoring. So to monitor effectively, you need to have logging, basically. So you cannot monitor individual systems. So ideally what happens is they are connected to all the systems logs are connected to a centralized system. And using a centralized system, for instance, SIEM, you can monitor the entire infrastructure from a security perspective to identify security incidents, to prevent security incidents. As mentioned earlier, logging is the process of recording all events/activities that occurs on a system. And monitoring is the process of tactically reviewing these events to identify abnormalities, because not all security events can be an incident. So you need to work on identify the right events as incidents so that you can concentrate on them. And these are some of the guidelines for logging and monitoring. You need to implement a continuous monitoring program. Monitoring cannot happen only during working hours. It should be a 24/7 program. Capture and forward all security events from all production systems at a minimum to a centralized system for monitoring. When I say production system, it's not only the application servers, it is also the security systems which are available, like firewall, IPS, every single logs. It is better to send it to a centralized system for monitoring, and implement SIEM solution to correlate these logs across multiple devices, because it can touch base on relative points. Deploy and monitor next generation firewalls to protect against advanced threats. Because next generation firewall, unlike the old firewalls, has additional capabilities to detect advanced threats. And implement egress monitoring. What is egress monitoring? You will be looking at the data which goes outside your environment and ensure all the data which goes outside the environment in any channel is monitored by a DLP solution. So any channel means it can be internet, email, USB, etc. So that you can stop sensitive data from leaving your network. Implement endpoint detection and response, because no longer it is enough to only stick to antivirus solution. Endpoint detection and response is going to assist organizations to it'll keep monitoring the endpoints for abnormal behavior, and whenever an abnormal behavior is determined, it's going to protect you, and endpoint detection and response is going to help you against advanced persistent threats. So that's what EDR's capability. And AVs in general are not effective against advanced persistent threats. The next thing which we are going to talk about, importance of patch and vulnerability management. Before I move on to patch and vulnerability management, a quick question. If anyone is interested, please unmute or type it in the chat. Do you think vulnerability management or vulnerability assessment is enough, or you do patch management only at the operating system layer? Is that enough to protect a server? Let me repeat the question. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Yes, it is not enough, as you said, no. So the reason being is, when a system is vulnerable, it is not only the OS. When you are installing even an antivirus program on a system or a security software on a system can be vulnerable. And these softwares usually run on system accounts, which means that they are running on high privilege accounts. So if there is a vulnerable software on a system, irrespective of any other controls you have, you can use that software as a channel to bypass all security mechanisms that are available to protect that system. So vulnerability assessment in general is part of security testing and not security assessment. There is a difference between security assessment and testing. Testing means you are finding out the effectiveness of the control. Assessment is more of a theoretical practice. Let's think of it that way. So these are the 5 processes usually done as part of VA, wherein you collect all config data. And vulnerability, we are talking here, it's not only a software vulnerability, but also a configuration vulnerability. Think of it that way. So collect config data and store collected data in a secure way. And you organize the data so that you can address critical systems first. Compare it against the baseline and report it. And you should not stop at reporting as part of vulnerability assessment. The next thing we need to do is patch management. And always perform VA when you first deploy new or updated systems. And it is not a one-time activity, it is a periodic activity. Whenever there is a new vulnerability which is found in the open, always run a scan within your environment. And after a security breach, you need to also run a vulnerability assessment to ensure, let's say you have a periodic cycle, but this is the time wherein you do ad hoc scans. And vulnerability assessment is going to help you document the security state of the system. So this is about vulnerability assessment. When you find vulnerabilities, if it is a software vulnerability, the best thing you can do is patch them. So set up an automated mechanism to patch vulnerabilities, but the automated mechanism should be in such a way that the patches are tested in a development environment and approved before it gets deployed on the servers. So do not, as you know that there is a critical vulnerability and you need to patch it, but do not patch a vulnerability without testing. The reason is it can bring down the application. So that is what a patch management system is all about. So now we are going to talk about the guidelines of patch and vulnerability management. I hope I'm not too fast because there are too many topics to be covered as part of security operations. I'm trying my best. I made it as simple as possible. Okay. Have a system in place that can perform patch and vulnerability management. Please do not rely only on manual approach. Ensure these systems can determine what systems need to be patched in which order, how to deliver these patches, and when to deliver the patches. That is very important. Consider configuring patch management system to deploy the patches to your computers from an internal server. The reason being is if you're going to depend on an external server, if there is a DNS change or if there is a DNS eject, it will download a different patch. Or if there is a new patch available, it will download a new patch instead of the patch which is being tested in your environment. Test patches. Always test patches on non-production systems before deploying them across organizations or production systems. And incorporate testing process in your patch management. You're going to test and then you're going to schedule a timeline to deploy these patches. So that is very much important. So if you have this testing process within your patch management system, it will raise an alarm. It will be a workflow for patch management so that if you're trying to push it on a production system, it is going to automatically say, okay, you haven't tested this patch basically. Change management, the another important topic when it comes to security operations. This is nothing but a series of processes that maintain systems confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you go perform an unauthorized change, what would happen is you can bring down a server. For instance, a patch management, as let's take that as an example. You are going and deploying a patch without testing, there is a very high chance that it can bring down the server. So if you have a change management process in place, it is going to ask you whether, okay, did you test the patches? What was the cause? And then the change management say, okay, did you also try have in principle, do you have any rollback procedures that are in play? So what will you do if something goes wrong? All these things will be addressed and assessed, addressed, and only then change management will approve a certain deployment during a particular time. And as part of change management, they will also assess the other external factors that would be affected. So if a notification is required, we need to also ensure a notification is sent out to all the affected party. And as mentioned earlier, undocumented changes can wreak havoc in any environment. So if you go do change without knowing, and if the system comes down, everybody is going to suffer. So always follow a change management procedure. And to put it simple, it's a systematic way of approving and executing a change to IT services in general. That is what a change management is all about. These are some of the guidelines for implementing change management. Establish a change management structure. A request should be done, approval, communication, documentation, testing, and then implement. And you do not stop only at implement, you will also report, monitor, and report after the change. So you can use change management in general to avoid not knowing how to address a problem that might result as part of the change. And you will have a set of procedures. So you'll be prepared. If something goes wrong, I can do this, and this is the period. And I've already notified about this particular change to end users. So you are on the safe side. And always have a baseline. Say, okay, these are the things you need to address. You need to know about interconnected system which would affect. So you should have a baseline to ensure that any changes meets the standard. If somebody comes and says, okay, I have 10 systems, out of 10 systems, tested systems, on 5 the change worked and on 5 it did not work, then I will not approve that change in production. So I would ensure at least you have more approval rate so that we can take risks. So it's more like managing risks, and you take a conscious decision to approve the change. Use versioning to compare current state of an object to the proposed change. So you need to have differences. You need to find a way to have those differences, and you can also have, if there is a problem, you can roll back to a previous version. And also perform a SIA to evaluate how a change may alter security in SIA is nothing but security impact assessment. So you, let's say you go perform a change and you need to ensure that it does not alter the current security state of an organization. So you need to perform a security. Its change is not only about at a functional level. By changing the function, it should not impact the security of the application or the organization. You need to ensure you do that. So so to simply put, as part of change management, there should also be a security personnel who evaluates the change. Now we will talk about incident response. So what is an incident? So there is a difference between security event and an incident. So only if you know the difference, you can have a proper incident response. Security event is like, let's say, for instance, you type in a wrong password on your system. It is a security event, but we do that. Everybody does it. But the same thing can happen. A wrong password, a brute force attack is happening in your environment on multiple systems using a credential. That is an incident. So same security event, but the modus operandi determines what it is. So as soon as an incident happens, you need to ensure you have an incident response to effectively contain the incident. So what happens is your incident response is going to take care in such a way that it will prevent a situation from becoming worse. And it will, if you have a proper plan in place, you are prepared. So if you are prepared, you can take correct action when a problem occurs. And it will also provide the team with all the tools that is required to contain the incident. And you should always ensure, and it will also ensure that team is well trained to contain any such incidents. This is going to be the incident response process. You first detect the problem, then evaluate the problem to identify whether it is actually a problem, then mitigate the damage, recover and remediate. After you recover and remediate, you do not stop there. You do a root cause analysis. You you create details, you create a detailed report, and you determine lessons learned, and you implement preventive controls. So as soon as you recover and remediate doesn't mean that incident response plan stops there. No, the steps you take further is going to have an effective incident response plan, and it will also prevent any such incident from happening again in the future. So implement preventive controls is a very important part as part of incident response. Follow a step-by-step incident response plan. Do not have an ad hoc plan. Take appropriate action across each step. That is very important as part of implementing an incident response plan. Ensure all relevant departments are included as to respond to incidents. Let's say, for instance, a server has a security event, but a server is managed by IT team, but there will be an application, there will be an application team. So you need to involve both the parties to fix the problem on that server. Implement specialty roles like red team and white hat pen testers, red team in your organization, so that they will find out any problems that might occur, any weakness in your environment. And you should give them the right tools, because if they do not have the right tools, they will not be able to contain the incident. You need to consult various sources of detection. So that is where the monitoring part comes into play. So if you monitor properly, you will be able to identify the incident at the early stage, and you will have the time to contain the incident. And you cannot work on all security events, because if you're going to work on all security events, you will not have the effort or the expertise to handle the right incidents. So you need to evaluate before you start working on an incident to determine whether it is actually this incident. You need to set baselines. The ways you can do it, you can correlate event logs to find out whether a security event warrants to be considered as an incident, so that you can kickstart an incident response plan. These are some of the guidelines. The triage is one of the important thing in incident to determine an incident. And after the incident, you need to strengthen the affected system based on the root cause analysis. As I said earlier, use remediation to go beyond recovery. and reverse the damage of the incident. Report the details of the incident and its response to management. And if required, because if an incident turns out to be a breach, you need to draft a report to any legal or regulatory agencies that requires it. Follow up on the main reports with lessons learned, so that you can use the lessons learned to fix the problem, fix the actual cause of the problem, and it will be a solution in itself. Investigation. So investigation is the next step. Seeking evidence for computer networks that maintain, so for instance, this is what digital forensics is all about. Seeking evidence on computer networks that might pertain to criminal or civil matters. What it means is, when there is a problem or when a breach has occurred, you need to do digital forensics to find out the cause of the problem. So that is what investigation is all about. So after an incident becomes a breach, you need to also find out how it happened, what has happened. First thing is, please do not shut down the system, because if you shut down the system, if there is a process running in the background, you will lose information about the process. So you need to discover evidence, you need to collect the evidence, and you need to maintain a chain of evidence, so that you can report, you can ensure that it is not tampered in any ways. You need to analyze evidence and you need to present the findings. These are very important in investigative procedure. Usually it should be methodical and verifiable and auditable. If it is not verifiable, nobody is going to take it seriously. And always remember, anything done on a computer is going to leave a trace, and there are investigating mechanisms which are available to find that trace. So that's basically what it is. So these are the guidelines for conducting investigations. An investigative process should be followed: discover, collection, analysis, and marketing. As I said earlier, your investigation should be methodical, verifiable, and auditable. Select the right type of investigation that is required based on the incident or the breach. A chain of custody should be maintained so that you can have a verifiable audit. You can go tell that nothing is tampered with the evidence. Use evidence collection process from discovery to presentation and to return. So when it comes to digital evidence and analyzing the digital evidence, always analyze only on the copy. So if you're going to seize a digital evidence, do not, you need to ensure all actions are in play so that the digital evidence is not tampered with. So if you want to analyze the evidence, you need to do certain activities, make a copy and then analyze the copy. Allow only trained personnel to access the original digital evidence, because an untrained professional can go and access it to analyze the evidence. Thereby, you will lose the evidence. And always completely document the entire process and preserve all activities. These are some more guidelines. Ensure anyone that handles the evidence complies with the above principles. And you need to ensure that evidence is admissible within your jurisdiction, because you might have certain requirements from a law, legal perspective, regulations perspective. You need to ensure evidence is collected, processed in a way which is acceptable. Always determine the root cause of an incident. So this is going to help you to better protect or improve the security posture of your company, organization. And always remember, you need special tools to deal with evidences. You should be prepared to invest, or you can get a service from a managed security services provider. You need to ensure all your network logs are robust, collected, audited, maintained, and accurate. Reverse engineer. No, this is not for everybody, but there are certain instances wherein you can reverse engineer to determine the origin and attack methods. Take an image of hardware device firmware without jeopardizing its integrity, so that you can also investigate the firmware, because some malwares are firmware dependent. They go sit on the firmware in itself. Draft a report that answers fundamental questions about the investigation. That is very much important. Last topic for today. I know we are overshooting the time. So disaster recovery. So these are the phases of disaster recovery: identify, document, train, assess, and update and maintain. So this is what it is. So this identify what are the disaster recovery implementation that is required for your organization. Document it, train all your personnel, assess them by doing tabletop exercises to ensure whether the procedures which you're going to follow is enough, and update and maintain it as required and do as per the review. If you think a better we can change something, we should be doing that, and it is a cycle again. Follow disaster recovery process, document it based on inputs from executive management so that you get a buy-in from the executive management. And the DRP or disaster recovery plan should be accessible to everybody. Even the smallest elements of business operation should be considered as part of DRP. Consider the risks, cost benefit analysis, and prioritization, because you cannot do a disaster recovery for an entire environment. So you need to only do it for the things which are critical and essential to run the business. Qualify potential incidents that would kick in a DRP in terms of priority levels. Differentiate roles and responsibilities. Assign responsibilities to stakeholders so that a DRP plan can be successful. Include steps to measure RTO and RTOs in your DRP plan. So you need to first consider whether you have the required RPOs and RTOs. So RTO is nothing but recovery time objective. RPO is nothing but recovery point objective. Train all selected staff. It's not like you give them a document, they are ready. You need to train and you need to test it multiple times. And you should also implement regular training exercise. That is very much important. Assess it to determine its effectiveness. If it is not effective, improve upon it. By defining a scope and the expectations of your test. And as soon as you conduct a test, you will know where to improve and use the results to improve your DRP. It's as simple as that. Having said that, we have completed the topic. If you have a few more minutes, I can run through the Ingram Micro Cybersecurity Services portfolio. We are considered as advanced solution provider. We do not no longer want to be only a distributor. So we also provide solutions. We have something called a discovery report, wherein you can use the discovery report to showcase any problems for your customers. So it's as of today, it's free of cost. What it does is, it's called Spyglass. What it does is, it'll go find the flaws from a hacker's perspective about an organization without touching an organization. It's more of a recon approach, and it is going to find the flaws. It is going to collect that information, and it will be a report which can be used to speak to your customers, or to from a customer perspective, they can use the report to improve security, and it's free of cost. And it is a very high level report. It talks about what are the things which are available from a hacker and hacker's recon perspective. And the beauty of it is, this will be done without even touching your environment, touching a customer's environment. That is the main thing. We have a virtual lab concept wherein we run multiple environment security products in the same environment, which can be used by customers, partners, vendors, to showcase their solution or test or do proof of concept. We don't have to wait for lift and shift of the environment. We can show it here. Cybergram, the third one, which talks about, is a cybersecurity maturity assessment tool. This is again available at free of cost as of today. You can use it. It is a 28 questions. It is as good as your answers. You can use it to have a executive report of your security controls in an organization. And the fourth one is, we look at we do not only look at products. We look at holistic solutions. So that is what we do as part of multi-vendor architecture solutions. This is our office in Dubai, Internet City. Just so you know, it's a picture of it. Holistic service portfolio. We from a cybersecurity perspective, we look at all aspects. So we have services for people, process, and technology, solutions for people, process, and technology. For people, we have a lot of trainings. We cover foundational trainings. We cover advanced cybersecurity trainings. We cover privacy trainings. And from a process perspective, we do technical assessments. We have consultancy services, auditing, and a complete managed security services portfolio, including SOC operations, digital forensics, penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, you name it, we would have it. And from a technology perspective, these are our vendors from a meter region perspective. So we have products from all these vendors, and we have actually even more at the global level. So that is more or less it. I did overshoot the time, but it is a very big topic. I tried to simplify it. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. If not, thank you for joining us, and you have a wonderful day. Cheers and thank you.